comfort and temperature are not the same thing, right? So you can be comfortable, but the temperature could be the same, and you could be uncomfortable,
right?
Comfort and science is a hard thing to quantify. They don't go together, right? Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Senior Editor Mark.
Hi, Patrick. Everybody.
And our Editorial Director, Brian.
Hey, everyone. Good morning.
And our producer, Jeff.
Hi there.
People know who we are. I'm tired of trying to, say our last names and, everyone knows who we are.
Yeah, that guy, this guy.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it is a pleasure to see you guys this morning. Thanks for being on the show.
Great to be here as usual.
Yeah.
What have you guys been doing? Who wants to go first?
To be here.
I can go first, sure. I'm, as I mentioned in the last couple podcasts, I'm in the middle of building a house, and it's starting to look like I'm going to be doing more and more of it on my own because it's really, really, really hard to get people to show up. So
do you think part of that is just they're so busy, or you're in a rural area, Mark?
It's because they're busy. Yeah. And I've been hearing this from even people who want to have small little jobs. It's just the subcontractors on new construction. If I was doing a small little bathroom remodel, maybe it'd be different, but it's such a big project that these subcontractors they can't afford to spend a week away from the projects that their general contractor, who's their bread and butter. They just can't afford to be away for that long. So, and I totally get it, and it's fine. I'm not in a huge rush, but anyway, I'm going to be probably doing a little more excavating and concrete work than I had planned on, which is okay.
Did you rent a machine already? Are you going to do
You know what? I do have a little skid steer. So I've got a 753 Bobcat, which is like my favorite thing in the whole planet. And so I'm able to do
Brian,
a little excavating.
What am I doing wrong in my life that I don't have a skid steer loader?
It is, it's extremely helpful. I lived in Minnesota and I had acreage, and my driveway was like 800 feet long plus parking. So when you get, in 5 years, it would have cost me as much as a skid steer to have somebody plow me out, 15 times a year.
Wow, so that's pretty cool. So did you drive that from Minnesota to Kentucky on the highway? How'd you get that there?
I trailered it down. Yeah, it was slow going. But yeah, so long story short, this weekend I'm going to be working on putting up some foam on the interior perimeter of the foundation, and then putting a little 57 rock in it. So that's
what's
what
57 rock? Is that a local?
I was thinking about doing a story on this because gravel is really confusing. There's out, and they do it a little different in the country, but there's enough continuity, I think, where people, it would be interesting because, I'm learning a lot more about there's certain things that are great for drainage. There's certain things that are just like these 57s, they compact like 95% as soon as you throw them down without tamping them at all. So that's what's going down in the foundation that I'm going to pour over. But yeah, so that's I'm learning a lot more about gravel. And I think at the very least, I'd probably do an online story on it because I think there's a lot.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I feel like one of the common things I hear about gravel under slabs and in other situations where it's used as a base, one of the common things I hear, and you just referred to it, Mark, is this gravel doesn't need to be compacted, but we compact it anyway.
I do
compact
feel like
it anyway. What comes after it doesn't need to be compacted.
but see, mine's coming up. I have the deepest spot. There's like a 5-foot hole I got to fill up in the deepest spot, and it gets shallower as it moves up the hill. But I did have to get engineering on it, and the engineer did say every 1 foot lift I gotta tamp it. But the funny thing is, I'm going to get one of those rock slinger guy trucks who he's got the big conveyor belt on it and just kind of spreads it nice and even. And I told him I was going to tamp it down at 1 foot lifts, and he goes, "Oh, this is 57s. You don't need to do that." I'm like, I'm still going to do it.
Well, I had to do a bunch of that for my barn under the slab, and here they call it process, and I don't know process what, right? But it's a mix of particle sizes and crushed stone that really jams together. Like Andy was driving his backhoe on it after I compacted it with a plate compactor, and it wasn't leaving any impression. And that thing weighs like 20,000 pounds. So yeah, it's as I understand it, like gravel is very regional because obviously it's expensive to move it around.
When I was doing my little research, though, I was looking at different websites, and they might call it different things, but it's what I've noticed is it's different colors, but they kind of have the same. Ours is gray, and Minnesota was orange, and yeah, it's depending on what the soil types are. But
Mark, are you putting in any piping for radon mitigation beneath your slab?
That's a good question.
It's a really good question. We're laughing because we added that question to the podcast questions. I think it's number 4, right? Or 2.
Well, we can wait and get to it then. How prepared I am for the podcast.
So wait a second. You're confusing me, Brian. You're going off script.
Okay, let's put that on hold.
What have you been doing, Brian?
Well, I think that for a little while anyway, it's going to be painful for listeners to hear about my project because, I'm just in such early stages that, there's not much going on right now. I'm waiting for the engineer to complete their work on the site design, site plan, and septic plan. And, I have the building plans I would say, I think the building plans are ready to go. I haven't had the architect do the finals yet. But the only reason why is, and I might have said this last time I was on the podcast, the only reason why is because I'm waiting for the engineers to finish their work. So, if any ideas come up, if anything comes to mind, I keep kind of looking at the plans. And so I'm just kind of timing those two things. The engineers say they will be done in the first 2 weeks of October. And so what I hope is that I'll have the final building plans, the site plans, and the septic plans, and be able to start applying for permits right away. So I'm I've been tempted to do some things like order my windows because I keep hearing about how long lead time.
Yeah, but then what the heck do you do with them? You know what I mean? Like,
well, my thought was to get a pod and put it on the property and order windows and put them in there. I'm just a little nervous about doing that without a permit in hand. So
I think that's smart.
It's an expensive purchase, the window and door package. So I'm kind of just like, what I'm hoping is that, this, as soon as I have those permits, I'm ready to go with a foundation contractor who I'll be reaching out to in the next few days. I got a good recommendation and ready to, get the septic installed. I have the excavator and the septic installer on board. Get the foundation contractor on board, and be ready to order lumber and windows and doors.
Cool.
What size septic? What did you guys do? Mound systems up there?
No.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Yeah, when needed.
Because in Minnesota, it's pretty much 100%.
Well, because you guys have those crazy clay soils, right?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So what was your design? How big of a tank and how much leach field or drain field?
I haven't seen the design yet, but it's a 2-bedroom house, but we're designing a 3-bedroom septic, which we talked about. We talked about on the show. Yeah, and how that kind of works in an odd way in our area, but it doesn't actually mean that you have to do much more around here, or at least in this jurisdiction, for the size of the septic. You have to have extra space for more leaching if needed down the road.
Right.
So it's sort of like, it's more of a backup plan to go from 2 to 3. 2 to 4, you have to have more leaching installed right away. So
yeah.
So that's where I'm at. I'm just sort of doing what I can to get prepared, and I'm waiting for the engineer, and I checked in with him last week, and his schedule hasn't changed. So that feels good.
All right. Well, yeah. I'm sure you'll keep us posted, and
it'll get more interesting as we start building.
How about you, Jeff? You made any progress on your deck?
A little bit, but nothing that really shows. It's all, the behind the scenes stuff, cutting strips of 30-pound felt and EPDM and sistering up joists and things like that, but nothing.
What are you using the EPDM for?
I'm gonna kind of do a sort of almost like a under deck drainage, but just like 3 feet to get it away from the house itself, and then using it to cap the joists as well.
So you're going to kind of drape it down in between the joists and
Exactly.
so kind of like that Trex system that they have.
Essentially, yeah, but only like 3 feet away from the house. So,
where'd you get the rubber membrane?
Ordered it from Home Depot.
What?
Yeah, ordered it online. It was shipped direct.
Did you have to buy like a warehouse's worth?
No, actually, they sell it in like 10 foot, 12 foot, 16 foot, 3 feet wide rolls.
What the heck do you think you do that with that?
I don't know. I know what I'm doing with it, but I don't know what I mean, they also sell it for like pond liners and things like that.
I got to get some of that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but it's amazing stuff.
Yeah, and different widths too. I mean, I got 16th inch, but 1/8 inch. They even do gym floors. It's like you start going
Jeff,
down
how
that
does
rabbit
a roll
hole.
of rubber roofing show up at your house?
Well, these were only 3 foot rolls, so
it's still heavy, I'm sure.
Yeah. They came in, like 6 inch square, 3 foot long boxes. Probably weighed like 40, 50 pounds.
Huh.
There's probably enough commercial roofing contractors in rural areas that, they don't have a lot of options where they can get to do repairs or whatever. They probably go to the Home Depot or Lowe's to get that stuff sometimes.
I think it's cool. I had no idea you could buy that there. So I've been drywall finishing, and it seems like my project would be easy. It's only 12 sheets of drywall. I think I told Brian it took 12 sheets. I needed 13, but I made it work. And it's 105 feet of inside corner and 95 feet of outside corner beads. So it's taken a long time to put a coat of drywall mud on this disaster. But the joyful part of it is I get a chance to try Festool's new drywall sander that they sent me months ago to try out. And it is honestly a fantastic machine. I don't know if I would pony up my own $2,200 to use it as occasionally as I would. But if you're a professional and trying to like keep your client's house clean during a remodeling project, it is sensational. It just works fantastic. It is a very good machine.
Patrick, you should those folks at Festool if you can hold on to that for a little while.
Let's not bring it up ever again.
Yeah.
And I didn't see, I saw your little video. I saw a little video that you sent, and I could see I'm assuming that's hooked up to it was a Fine or Festool? Festool, right?
It's a Festool VAG. It's all a system match thing.
And I'm assuming that vac system, has that self-cleaning filter thing where it
does, and it has a bag inside that is also filtering. And honestly, so I have this cheap black IKEA furniture in the barn, and I figured that was the perfect test bed to see if dust particles were accumulating on it. And honestly, there's none. It is really, really impressive.
Well, just the lighting on that was amazing.
So that's a mixed bag, I gotta say, Mark. Like,
oh, really?
If you're using it down low on the wall and you're in like normal ambient light, it is blinding. Like you can't see if you look at it, and look away. So I turn it off most of the time.
There's not a dial. You can't dial it down, or
it's on or off.
On or off. Well, the next model will have a dial now, I bet. Now that you said that.
There's probably like a phone app you can use to turn it up and down that I don't know about.
Yes.
But folks who are listening, look for more on that in the magazine and video. I've roped Rob Watsack into helping me do a video for the website, and I'll show you all this thing. It's got some really cool features, and the price will make you choke, but boy, it's a sweet piece of equipment. So as always, we heard from our listeners. This comes from Doug, who's in Colorado. Hi, Patrick. As a retired high school teacher, I could really relate to your interview with Roy Horn. Roy Horn, if you don't know, was my junior high shop teacher. I talked to him on Pro Talk. I started teaching in 1974 at a large high school in Omaha, Nebraska. My area was tech theater, but at the time it was considered part of IA, Industrial Arts. I also taught English, but it was more fun to go to the IA department meetings. I had a department head who really knew how to work the system to get what he needed in the way of tools and such. It was a great help for a new teacher. When I started, the main building housed 2 large wood shops, a print shop, classrooms for mechanics, auto body, machine shop, metal shop, sheet metal shop, and a vocational agriculture department. The district had a school farm near Omaha. In the late 80s, planning began for a major renovation. This was at a time when the push for every student to go to college was at its strongest. As a result, the shop building was torn down and replaced by a spectator gym. Below it was an area that contained what was left of IA. There was an AutoCAD lab and a classroom and a large open area that was used as a combined wood and metal shop. The district moved auto, machine shop, and electronics into a former school building for all high schools. This meant that students had to have room in their schedules for travel time. It was felt that no one school could afford the upgrades needed for areas such as auto mechanics or a machine shop. Things have been changing here in the Pikes Peak region. Schools have been adding programs for the skilled trades as people recognize the need. With the mounting debt incurred by students in 4-year schools, there's been an increased awareness of the good jobs going unfilled in the trades. Time will tell if this lasts or what new direction the pendulum will swing. Doug. Did you guys go to tech school, Mark?
Tech school, I mean, in junior high, I've had, in 8th or 9th grade, I had my first woodworking class, and I don't think there was a quarter through 8th, 9th, through my senior year that I didn't have some shop, metal
Did
shop,
you like
or
it?
wood shop, or it was a blast.
Yeah.
I just sitting in a class, high school was extremely boring to me. I did college, and college was much more enjoyable to me. It was like night and day, but just the college or sitting in classroom was awful to me personally.
Brian, did you have shop? You're a little younger than us.
We had shop classes. We didn't have very strong, in the town I grew up in, we didn't have very strong tech programs, but we did have elective classes in middle school and high school. Well, I don't know if in middle school they were electives. We might have had to take those classes. And so, we were able to take some things. I took a woodworking class in high school and a few other things. There were some auto shop classes. I didn't take those, but I know that they were available. So it was sort of there if you were interested and wanted to try it out. I don't remember the programs being particularly strong programs, though.
How about you, Jeff? We've talked about your experience.
Yeah, so I had shop in 7th and 8th grade, and that was right about the time when a few girls were starting to take shop classes, and a few guys were starting to do home ec classes.
But ordinarily, that would not have been the case. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, before that was like unheard of. But then, once I got to high school, it was like if you were in a vocational program, you did your core classes, math and English at the high school, and then you hopped on a bus and went somewhere else for any kind of vocational training or things like that.
Well, I hope Doug's area is an indicator of things to come for the rest of the country, because we need some folks joining the ranks because we're getting thin. This comes from Paul. Mm-hmm. Hello from London, Ontario, Canada. There is a blue tuck tape specifically designed for polyethylene vapor retarders. Here's the listing from Home Depot, Canada. So we were talking about how you glue polyethylene, and I'm hoping that you can buy this in this country. Paul sent us a link to this Home Depot product that you can allegedly glue polyethylene or tape polyethylene. Paul also writes, thank you, Fine Homebuilding and Mike Gerton, for his video series on attic air sealing. After partially air sealing the attic, mostly at the top plates on interior walls in the autumn, I found last winter that I didn't need a humidifier. The humidity varied between 42 and 51%. This summer has been fairly hot, and with a thermostat set at 22 degrees Celsius, 24 hours a day, the peak temperature in our hottest room on the ground floor was usually 25 Celsius, with as low as 32% humidity just after sundown. The second floor is also noticeably cooler due to the reduced stacked effect and the lower humidity. One bad thing is my skin is too dry year-round. When I finish air sealing, I'm probably going to have to install a heat recovery ventilator in order to ensure enough fresh air. I guess I have to avail myself of the recently announced Canada Greener Homes Grant. Have you heard of this?
No.
I think it's a federal or a national program in Canada to offer rebates for folks who do energy improvements in their homes, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
Speaking of that, and this might be different conversation. But I just found out. So I was asking my inspector about how to insulate a crawl space, what the minimum, maximum, or what the R value they're looking for. And he said, because I have a co-op electric company, they're the one who actually tells me what. Is that common up where you're at?
I've never heard of that, but of course it is, because
No.
they're the ones who are making the electrons, and they want to make sure they make enough.
Right. It's actually turned out to be a good deal, because they come out and do an energy audit before, when the framing's up, and then when you're done. And if you pass, if you build it a certain way, which I was going to do anyway, it's like a $750 rebate or something like that. So, and it's
Is it dependent on what fuel source you use for heating?
I'm all electric, so I'm not sure if that, if it sounds like it would, you could have been a combo and it would have been the same. So that was interesting. But back to the Tyvek tape, or not Tyvek tape, the vapor barrier tape. We always just use house wrap tape. Is that not
Does
okay?
it stick?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
So it's notoriously difficult to get stuff to stick to, as I understand it, and that was one of Martin Holliday's backyard tape test media, right, Brian? Wasn't poly one of the things he tried taping?
I believe it was.
Yeah. We asked for information on full-face respirators for kids a while back. Hi, all. I was going to say that there probably isn't a full-face respirator for kids, but a quick Google search revealed this unintentionally hilarious item of questionable value. So is this crazy looking escape pod for your child? Yeah, it's got a built-in sippy cup, which I thought was awesome.
Wow. It's like, where are you bringing your kids? It's like the idea of getting a hazmat suit for my kid has just never come up. I mean,
don't you visit asbestos remediation sites with your kids, Mark? What are you doing?
And that was the kind of picture, the advertising picture was kind of common. It's like, what? Why is there a kid there? What's going on? It was very strange.
That being said, there are a few great disposable respirator options for 3-year-olds, and he has a link to a YouTube video that we'll put on the podcast page. The usual caveats apply. It has to fit and seal well. If he's really worried about his kid, he should probably have a qualitative fit test to make sure it actually fits, but the kits are quite expensive. And then there's a series of products that the video we're going to link recommends, and I'm not going to bother reading that. But thanks for that, Andrew. If you have little kids, I would say start them young with good safety practices, because it is harder to learn the older you get. So this comes from Pete. Hey, podcast, I heard Brian's project for building a new house. What a dream, and pretty much what I dream about. I look forward to hearing more about Brian and the crew on this. I hope you talk extensively about it. It did raise 2 questions I'd like to get the team's thoughts on. 1, thinking photovoltaic with a new build and planning from this from the outset, I understand there is loading, so structure needs to support this. However, with a clean slate, what type of roofing works best? The same level quality for under the panels as everywhere else? How about the panel supporting structure and keeping the penetrations to the roof structure watertight and maintenance free? So, what do you guys think? I didn't know, but they make mounts for every type of roof, near as I can tell. And you've been on one of these projects, right, Brian? What did they use?
Yeah. So I mean, let's talk about the structural question, because I didn't look into this, but I believe that the loads, the dead loads in the code for roofs are sufficient for PV. I mean,
that's
we're
my
putting
understanding
PV
too.
on old houses all the time, and these are light systems, and homes aren't having any trouble with loading. So I don't believe there's anything you need to take into consideration for your average PV system on a code built roof when it comes to loading. So and then when it comes to choosing a roofing material, certainly like standing seam metal roofing, standing seam steel roofing has a really slick system for installing PV, because you just kind of clamp the mounts onto the standing seam, so there are no penetrations. It just the mounts clamp right to the roof, and so that seems pretty slick to me if you can afford and want a steel roof. But the mounts for asphalt shingle roofs are pretty slick too. They're just sort of these self-flashing boots that get slipped up underneath the shingle above, and they have a lag that drives into the rafter, and it's all just the system just flashes itself. There's a cap that goes on top of that lag that also holds the mount that flashes the lag. So the crew that I saw, they spooged out some sealant on right where they were about to drive that lag. But that's about it. The flashing boot and the system itself took care of everything.
This has worked out. I mean, these things go up every day. This has been just worked out.
And you can also run all your, you don't have to. You can go down into the attic space for the cable runs and electrical stuff, but you can also just run it in conduit on the roof and bring it down the side of the building, which is what I saw the crew do.
I think that looks kind of hacky, man.
I wouldn't, if it was steel or asphalt, like you said, I wouldn't let that really decide your choice on which roofing. Now, if you're doing cedar or maybe a tile, that might be a little more challenging. But given that, there's probably really slick systems for that as well.
I bet there is.
So I'm gonna bring in a ringer here. Coincidentally, I heard from George Hart, who is a solar industry expert. And he wrote in about home battery systems. So I emailed him and asked him what he thought the best roof was for under a PV roof-mounted array. And he said this: "Hey, Patrick, the word best means many things to many folks. Best looking, easiest to install, longest lasting, most economic. It's all about what the end user values at a personal level. Personally, I love a standing seam metal roof for solar panels. The mounting clamps are non-penetrating and easily repositioned. Depending on the pitch, they can be tricky to install because the material can be quite slick, but I think the finished product gives a clean, modern look. There are also some really interesting products for the terracotta tile market that look cool, but I haven't had much experience with them." So there you go. Is that Cujo out there?
Yeah, that's me. That's my dog. Probably an unsuspecting UPS driver out there, I'm sure.
It's a new addition to the podcast.
Yeah.
So thanks, George. I'll
introduce her one of these shows. I'll introduce her.
George said that it doesn't matter. So there you go. This comes from, I forget. Who's this come from, Mark? "I'm building a house with a mother-in-law suite on one side of the garage and the main dwelling on the other. The mother-in-law suite is going to have a crawl/storage space under, while the main house is slab on grade. Radon mitigation systems are not code required in my area. Do you think I should add a system anyway to one or both sides? And what's an effective yet easy and inexpensive way of installing one?"
I love
Do you have any answers on this, Mark?
Anyone? So when I stopped building, it was probably 11 years ago when I stopped building houses, and it was just radon was just coming in. I mean, it was literally, I think, the year, it wasn't mandatory in Minnesota until the year after. So I honestly don't have a lot of experience with it.
So radon is a regional problem. I think you'd agree. So was it a problem in certain areas of Minnesota where you lived?
Minnesota, it's a regulation heavy state. So I think it was just kind of a blanket thing. They just say if it's dangerous somewhere. Now here, I asked the inspector, I said, his name is Marty. I asked Marty if he, what people are doing. Are they putting it in? Has it been a problem? Because it is a regional thing. And he said it's actually regional within, it's not even just the whole state. It can be regions within a county.
Right.
So he didn't really have an answer for me. He said most people don't, but on occasion they do. So that wasn't all that helpful.
It sure seems like when building a new house and pouring a new slab, something you'd just want to take the precaution and install the pipe and riser, and just you can cap it off and never do anything with it if you test and you don't have an issue, right? And if you test and there is an issue, you can vent it. And if it's a serious issue, you can add a fan.
You can't tuck those into a plumbing stack. I assume they need to be vented separately. I would imagine.
I believe they're supposed to be independent.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
And as far as the pipe underneath, we're talking. If I recall, they're just basically using sleeved drain tile, and then just hooking up, making sure that
fan. Yeah.
Or even not. I mean, yeah, like Brian said, just run the pipe up, and if you got problems, if I was going to do that, I'd probably run the pipe all the way to the attic and maybe cap it in the attic. That way I don't have to mess around with I would
If you're
just
not going
assume
to use it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would just assume not have extra penetration through the steel roof if I didn't have to. But if it turns out there's radon in there, then all I got to do is punch it through the roof instead of making a new chase through the walls or having it on the outside or something like that.
Yeah, probably a good idea to have a plan for where the pipe will go if you need it, and if that's going to be a hidden space, why not? Again, it seems like pretty cheap insurance for something that could be very expensive if you don't get prepared for it.
Sure.
And,
Yeah,
and
that's the way I was leaning. I mean,
Yeah.
in the crawl space, it was kind of a no-brainer because I have the pipe there anyway. But in the slab on grade, there is not going to be any drain tile pipe, so it is kind of an extra step, but it's not that. We're talking a couple $100 probably, or a few hundred tops.
Brian, have we covered this subject in the magazine recently? I don't remember seeing a radon story in a long time.
I think it's been a while.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good thing to cover. Despite the fact that the systems are pretty simple, like it's not and often you have you're installing the components of the system, the crushed stone, the polyethylene, vapor retarder. You're installing those things anyway. Those are the components of your radon mitigation system. So it's really just the perforated pipe.
Right.
That is an addition.
The science behind it is pretty darn simple. It's just you make a hole where it can get out and not anywhere else.
Right, exactly.
So do you? Quick question on the poly. I was reading in the code book that I swore I read that it's a 10 mil poly required, but I asked the inspector here, and they only require 6. Do you know anything about that?
6 mil poly is pretty heavy. Unless you're a complete lunkhead, it's going to be fine. You know what I mean?
That's what I would think.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty common.
Unless you're like using, recycled glass as your aggregate underneath, then that might be a problem.
And 10 mil poly, it's really expensive compared to 6 mil.
And I bet harder to get. You can buy 6 mil at the home center.
Yep. You know what? Can I interrupt? We didn't answer one of
your questions.
No, there'll be a lot of that. No, the last he asked about. There was a question about roofing, and he asked about deck. What would you do if you're going to install?
Oh, geez, sorry. Yeah, Pete. Sorry, Pete. PAS decks, we all love them, and they're usually the first thing to be put off when value engineering because they can always be added later. However, with a new build, knowing that you add a deck/porch, would you do something different with the framing, foundation, or cladding in those areas? Thanks. Looking forward, hopefully, to some discussion on these topics. And go, Brian! So put the ledger there for your deck or your porch, right? It's a no-brainer. Gosh, it's so much harder to do it after the fact. Flash it, put the ledger there.
Yeah.
If you're really strapped for cash, you don't have to buy the $50 worth of structural screws, but just get it there.
You know what? Actually, I would say that was one tip I was going to give. Use the go through bolts through the ledger into the rim is about as sturdy as you're going to get. And I would do that before you insulate your rim joist. It's going to be way
good
better.
Idea.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to have to be digging that out, and it's just going to be a drag. And then re-insulate it. So do it. Attach the ledger and then insulate, because most people are spraying that area. So do that.
You're going to use bolts, not structural screws, huh?
If I had access to that, you can't. That's indestructible. But I would. If it was already insulated, I'd have no problem using structural screws.
I would have no problem using structural screws. You don't have to go inside.
Either way.
Just imagine the time that's.
No, that's true.
Those things are awesome.
They are.
So those were good questions. Thanks, Pete. Okay, so did we get to all your questions, Mark?
Oh, come on, no. How many hours do you have? But
so have you decided you're going to put the radon system in at this point? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, that's the way I was leaning. But I was, if you guys said, radon's hooey, I wouldn't bother with it. Then I would think twice. But
no, well, I'm planning the same thing.
But so do you have to have the pipe? Isn't the gravel, a sufficiently open material that you could suck gas through it? I mean,
because it is. I'm going to have tons of gravel. That's actually a good question.
What I don't understand the question. The pipe is to exhaust it.
Yeah. So if you just put a pipe, forget about the drain tile under the slab. If it's all gravel under there, it's porous and air is flowing. Why not just
Put
stick
a hole in the
4-inch
slab
pipe?
and just have the gravel be what amounts to the drainage tile.
Yeah.
Oh, so just a 4-inch pipe with an open end.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I would eliminate the tile under the slab and just have a hole in the slab and then connect that to a pipe.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if Brian's getting it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So you don't even run the horizontal pipe.
That's what I'm thinking. If I'm asking if you have to do that, I wonder if you do.
I mean, if it was sand, for sure, whatever kind of virgin soil. But if it's all, I mean, if like a 2 feet of gravel under, that's pretty porous. That's pretty porous.
So the key is going to be, I guess, no matter. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just sticking the pipe into the gravel. But the key to making it work is going to be air sealing that
everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
That poly. Yeah, it's got to be tight to the. It's got to be sealed.
Well, so I ask this because in retrofit situations, they often just drill a hole in the slab with a core bit and connect a pipe to it. Right? They're not cutting up the slab and putting pipe under. Oftentimes, I mean, maybe you have to do that sometimes. I don't know. We need a radon expert on the show, clearly. This comes from Steve. About a year ago, you guys talked about a comfortable combination of ambient temperature and heat radiating off a surface, i.e. a floor or a wood fire. The gist was that you can be comfortable in a 70-degree room or a cooler space with a fire radiating heat. Maybe window shades isolate the radiating heat, making the room feel more comfortable. Without shades, lots of surfaces are warmer, while with the shades, most surfaces remain cool, even though the shade is radiating a lot of heat. It's easier to step back from a shade than step away from a warmed floor, which is likely to be closer to the middle of the room. I guess the question is whether the test that showed shades don't work measured both air temperature and how dispersed the radiating heat is. If this is an intelligent thought, you're good teachers. Thanks for the care you put into the podcast. Well, Steve, it's a good question.
It's a really great question. And it made me, I don't know the answer, exactly, but I do know that the reverse is true, right? When you're in a room that has a comfortable ambient temperature, but you're near a cold surface, like a cold window glass, you begin to feel cold because you're losing heat to that surface. So I know that it works sort of. I know that the opposite of what he's describing is true. And you can have a comfortable ambient temperature and feel cold.
I want to say that comfort and temperature are not the same thing, right? So you can be comfortable, but the temperature could be the same, and you could be uncomfortable,
right?
Comfort and science is a hard thing to quantify. They don't go together, right?
And that radiant heat that comes through the windows, and they're right. As soon as it hits the backside of those shades, what a lot of people say, it's like, well, those shades heat up and that heat has already entered your house, so it's too late by then. But that's not. There's so many different angles to this, and there's so many. I did just a quick little search, and energy.gov said that tightly installed cellular shades can reduce heat loss through windows by 40% or more. I mean, that's quite the claim. I mean, that's unbelievable. But
I believe that, but these are not the shades you buy at Home Depot. These are like shades that have sides with tracks and weather stripping. This is like more like the akin to the gate they put down in front of the storefront at the mall, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's my experience that if it's really hot out in a room, I lower the shades, it feels less hot in the room. I mean, that's just my experience. And if I open the window on a sunny day and the sun's shining on in the middle of January, the room feels warmer. So there's so many variables to this.
Jeff, you're a man of science. What's your definitive answer on this?
I think there's probably a combination of the psychological effects and just the slowing of the transfer of heat. Even if the heat's in the building, it's not transferring as rapidly.
To you. Well, once again, if anyone out there has more knowledge of this, I would love to hear from you. But, comfort is a very interesting question. And it's something that my friend Mark Jasom, who's designs HVAC systems for institutional buildings, is always struggling with. You can make a majority of people comfortable, but there's always going to be a percentage who are uncomfortable because their needs are different than the other folks in the majority, and it's something that building owners struggle with for sure.
When I was a few years ago, I was working on an article on Windows and interviewed a few architects and a passive house designer, and basically was told over and over and over again, forget about energy performance with Windows and focus on comfort. It was that was their mantra, that upgrading the performance levels of your Windows was small potatoes when it came to the efficiency of the house. And there are other places you can spend your time and money on that
with
effort,
more bang for your buck, but
very important for the occupant comfort.
I believe it. What were you going to say, Mark?
I don't remember. How's that for honesty?
Yeah, I hate my windows in my house. By appearances, they would look fine, but they're crappy. They're terrible. I feel cold in front of them. And I felt cold in front of the windows at the Taunton offices, too, so maybe I'm just cold.
Yeah.
This comes from Diazswag in Daly City, California. I pretty much feel like I spent a fortune buying a really crappy house as far as the building science goes. The heating bill is astronomical. I went from an apartment building paying about $50 a month for all utilities to about $500 per month on just electricity/gas in the winter months in this new house. What are the big bang for the bucks upgrades I should do? There's no insulation in the house. It uses knob and tube wiring everywhere, so I'm hesitant to add insulation. However, most contractors I've spoke with said knob and tube should be removed, and it's safer, but for the price and hassle, it's better just to risk putting insulation over it, since it's relatively safe and most likely won't have any issues. The big appliances are gas, like the furnace, which is an 80% efficiency unit, 60,000 BTUs. There's a stove, laundry dryer. I recently replaced my water heater to a hybrid heat pump version since it had to be replaced anyway, and there's a rebate in my area currently. I'm not sure if I made the right decision because I realize electricity is one of the highest rates. Electricity rates are the highest in the nation in this area. Windows are mostly double pane, and I'm not sure the brand, but it's probably not a super high-end version. There are a few windows that are still aluminum frame single pane, but just a few. The crawl space is vented, but I'm not sure if it warrants sealing in my area's climate. I may consider solar panels in the near future. Any advice would be appreciated. Thanks. So this originally appeared on the Green Building Advisor website, and I thought it was such a good question that I stole it for here because there's a lot to unpack, and Brian has to go first because I'm a bit overwhelmed.
What part of California did they say they were in?
So Daly City, and it is in the Bay Area. And I should point out that I looked up the home prices in Daly.
The home prices.
Yeah. So the median listing is $1.1 million. The median listing price per square foot is $700, and the median sold home price is $1.1 million. So.
Yeah.
This is, by any measure, a very expensive area.
San Francisco is the first city in, I think, the United States, besides maybe Manhattan, I guess, but that the median home price was over $1 million. That's just unbelievable.
Crazy. Yeah.
So here's
weird
another.
About that is the temperature, too, though. In January, the average low in January is 46, and the average high is 57.
They
and
don't
in
need
July,
heat. What is this heating bill?
It would even surprise me more. In July, the average high is only 72.
Yeah.
So,
here's an interesting nugget about Daly City. The cost of living in Daly City is estimated to be 194.5% of the national average, making it one of the most expensive cities in the U.S. There you go.
There's a lot to unpack in this question, and I know that I know I've talked to many electricians about knob and tube wiring who have said, if you leave it undisturbed, and if things are working fine, it's not a problem. It's still, I don't know why I get nervous about it. It's very old stuff at this point. I get nervous about working around knob and tube and not upgrading it. So my first
And can
thought,
I say something before I forget? The addition, when knob and tube wiring was used, you're talking about 30 and like 60 amp services. That
Yeah.
is not enough juice for a modern house.
Right.
And that either means that they're limping along on these small services, or there's been a panel added, and who knows the quality of work that
Right.
tied the existing knob and tube into the new panel. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the next thought that I have, which is kind of simple, is, and I wasn't going to mention this because of cost effectiveness, but he mentioned adding PV, and so, my thought, if that's really something that he's going to consider, my thought is, do a lot of air sealing, do some sensible insulating, add the PV and install a heat pump. Mini split.
He's in the perfect spot for PV. I think we would all agree that it's like sunny California. I don't know, the Bay Area isn't as sunny as a lot of California, but there's great weather there.
Yeah.
I think you need an energy audit. You need someone who's got a HERS certification to come into your house and tell you what to do. I'm sure that there's going to be big holes that are going to provide a lot of bang for the buck if your energy costs are like this where you are, right? These are some big holes that your conditioned air is leaking out of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You get up in the attic and you'll see most of them.
Yeah. And before, and I agree on the knob and tube, and plus now is the time to do it. It's going to be a heck of a lot easier for an electrician to snake it through without those walls being insulated. I wouldn't even consider insulating those walls before replacing that. And really one of the things you could, probably one of the cheapest and maybe easy and effective things you can do is just seal up everything. Seal up around every kind of penetration through especially your walls and your attic. And just that alone, I mean, sure, no insulation's not a great thing, but if you can prevent a good chunk of that airflow moving through those walls, that will just improve comfort level, if not save money.
Yeah.
Especially where he is. It's going to be a huge help.
Yeah.
What do we think about the windows? Like we always say, that's not the low-hanging fruit, but an energy audit will decide if that's true. We sometimes say to folks that you can use interior storms, but that's typically in much colder places than Bay Area.
Oh, my friends at Marvin are not going to like me, but that would not be there that I'd spend the money first.
Not first, and it might be something to do, but it's like you said, Patrick, it's just usually not the low hanging fruit. Of course, that changes if the windows, if there's comfort issues by the windows, it changes if they don't operate well. Then maybe they do become low hanging fruit. But in terms of energy performance, typically, comfort and energy performance, typically that's not the first move.
I was going to say you're going to want to go in that crawl space, and I bet there's a lot of big holes in the floor of your dwelling that are connecting the outside through the floor that separates the crawl space from the living space. Like the attic, these are big holes oftentimes, and you might want to just poke your head in there and see what's going on.
Yeah, and he may not need to switch to a conditioned crawl space, but if he's not going to switch to a conditioned crawl space, it should be isolated from the living space.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So what do you think about buying a $1.1 million house that you have $500 a month utility bills?
Yeah, if I was making $5 million a year, that would be not a big deal.
There's not
Jeff,
a lot of...
what do you think about this house in Daly City, California?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start with air sealing. I think that's the top line.
Yeah, my guess is when this house was built, and most of the development in this area happened in the, I don't know, probably the 30s through the 60s, maybe the 70s, right? I'm guessing those has board sheathing, and all the things that make a house especially drafty.
Yeah, with knob and tube, it's got to be board sheathing and
yeah, right.
And lath and plaster walls, probably. So.
Well, I want to remind folks that the Midwest Building Science Symposium is coming up, and let me get the dates for that. But in Kansas City, Missouri, the Fine Homebuilding podcast will be making an appearance after this show. And I would encourage anyone who's going to be attending that to please stick around for our recording. Rob and I are going to be there, and we're hoping to take guest questions for the show, and it should be pretty awesome. So this is September 21st. Nope, my bad. It's the following week. So it is this is terrible. The 28th through the 29th in Kansas City, Missouri at, and we'll put a link to the event on the podcast page for those of you who haven't signed up. But you better hurry, because the last I heard, they were into the overflow reserve area. So they're waiting for folks who are deciding they can't go, and they're going to have some additional spots open up potentially. But if you haven't signed up, get on the wait list and hope that someone isn't showing. But it's good news that the folks in this part of the country, which we don't hear a lot from on this podcast, are having their own building science symposium, which is pretty awesome. What do you know about this, Brian?
I know that I know. I guess I know a lot about it. It is the creative child of Travis Brungart and Joe Cook, who are out in Prairie. Is it Prairie Village or Prairie City? Just outside of Kansas City, and they run Catalyst Construction, and they're just super. I think they are both super passionate builders who want the opportunity to learn, and kind of just said we have to create that, and they have Jake Bruton not too far away, and they have Randy Williams. Well, Randy's I guess kind of far away, but he's in the middle of the country, and they've just sort of created a strong building science and building community out there. And this is, I think, the second year that they've done it, and they've really put together a great program, sort of with this grassroots effort. So I think it's awesome. I'm glad, I'm glad you're going to be there. I'm glad FHB team's going to be there. I encourage people to, go to these types of events. Go to the BS and beer groups in your area if you have one, or start one. And because I think we've been in the business of sharing building information for a long time. The people on this podcast have, and I think we'd all agree that the amount of information being shared now has grown exponentially through these grassroots efforts, and it's great. We're seeing so many more architects and builders doing better work, and making smarter decisions and discovering new products, and because of the efforts of these types of groups. Mike Maines and Dan Colbert up in Maine starting the first BS and Beer group. It wasn't called that at the time. It was just they just got together at a lumber yard there with I can't think of his name, the gentleman who owns the lumber yard, but they started getting together once a week, having a beer and sharing what they knew and bringing in people to give presentations. I think it's all awesome. It's just so good.
The way Travis related to me is that, he had been hearing over and over again from his peers that, well, there's no market for high performance building in this part of the country. And he's like, well, if we want to market for it, we have to do it and create it. And so that was the genesis of this idea, and it is a great idea.
Travis is like the poster child for that, right? Because a couple of years ago when I started talking to Travis, he said the same thing. I don't get a lot of jobs that I can do high performance on. And now watching him work for the past couple of years, I'm seeing him finding ways to improve the quality of his builds over and over and over again as he learns more, and as probably learns to speak to his clients in new ways, and and bring these sort of details into the projects in cost-effective ways. So
I think that's the point. He would say that oftentimes it's not very much more expensive. It's a small amount of money we're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you all will be there. Once again, that is September 28th and 29th. We're podcasting the afternoon of the 29th, so hope to see you there. Anything you guys want to say before we part company?
Well, I did. I did look quickly to see at while we were talking about taping polyethylene. I did look quickly to see Martin's backyard tape test, and he did test on polyethylene. And there's a few recommendations in that article. So check that out on Green Building Advisor. Just search backyard tape test. You'll find recommendations. It's unscientific, but somewhat
It's
rigorous.
better than science.
Rigorous testing of tapes on all sorts of substrates. And I also noticed that Martin's blog today, which is September 17th, says New York Times honors the best architects. Get ready to cringe. So I recommend we all go and read that, because I'm sure that's going to be an excellent read.
Can I guess it has something to do with leaky buildings, if I had to guess? Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Brian, Mark, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Folks, please go to iTunes and review us. It's been a long time since that's changed. I do check it pretty often, and it's nice to have reviews that are more current, because I think people think it's legit if they are. So thanks again for listening. Do your homework. See you at the BS and Beer Symposium in the Midwest at the end of September. Thanks, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building.